Good evening, good evening, good evening. Good evening to those who are now coming in. Good evening. Share the live as you now come in. Share the live. Share the live as you're now in. Share the live. Good evening to you all. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Good evening once again. Good evening to those who are now joining. Share the live as you now come in. Share the live as I talk to you this evening. Let's share the live so we can have a very wonderful and fruitful discussion. Last night I had a little hiccups with the internet, and I was kind of cut off, so I couldn't come back on, and it's a struggle with the internet company. It's a real struggle to keep on a good path when the evening has reached, so I can have the Gavin Matthews show live. So good evening to all those who are now joining. Share the live, share the live, share the live. Tonight, it's a straight talk. It's a talk about the U.S. influence in Guyana's political culture. And it's now a case study by the State Department, which has a lot of influence on the Central Intelligence Agency and all the intelligence sectors in the U.S. about Guyana. So I want to take us back to a point where we need to start our discussion from. So before I do that, let me say welcome to those who are now joining from Guyana, to the Caribbean Isles, the West Indian Isles, the Pacific Isles, the British Virgin Isles, the US Virgin Isles, Mexico. It's the US, Canada, UK, EU, China, Beijing, Hong Kong, Taiwan, uh, Japan, the Korean Peninsula, India, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan, to the Australian continent, the New Zealand Isles, the Tonga Isles, the African continent, and all the countries that are normally be of faith with the government show on that particular continent, to the South American continent, as far away as Chile and Argentina and Venezuela and Colombia, Brazil, Suriname, French and Dutch Guyana, the Netherlands, um, Falklands. They have Guyanese living in the Falklands area, right? And there are a few different things that are going on that we need to catch. Yes. And we're back. Since we have that problem cleared up, yes, we're back. So there are a few things that information needs to be given on. And the conversation is based upon U.S. involvement in Guyana's political history. And we need to discuss where we are pertaining to that. Because there's a whole lot of things that some of us don't know. And we still don't know. And I'm going to start where the U.S. involvement came in 1961. After President Kennedy took office on the 20th of January in 1961, in April, he approved a covert operation termed the Bay of Pigs in April of that same year. And the Bay of Pigs invasion was against Fidel Castro's Cuba, because at that time they had problem with Cuba dealing with Russia as a friend, and Russia and the US had a little Cold War at that time. But that operation failed. It failed miserably. It caused the United States a whole lot of embarrassment. And that operation was led by the Central Intelligence Agency, because you had operatives on the ground doing their field work, trying to let them know where is Fidel Castro's weakness and where you can invade. And all these things was going on. So the administration was not allowed, and I'm talking about the Kennedy's administration, John F. Kennedy's administration. They were not prepared to allow another emergence of another Cuba, and that was British Guyana then. Because they saw Cheddy Jagan as a communist. They looked at his style of politics as something not according to their likeness, because they knew if Jagan would have taken power based upon his communist understanding or his ideologies, there goes another emergence of another Fidel Castro. So there and then they had what you call a simple territorial operation went down in Guyana through the State Department. And document shows a persistent attempt by the John F. Kennedy administration from April 1961 until elections of August 21, 1961, to have Mr. Jagan not really come to power. And what I'm talking about here in this country right now is that we're talking about the influence of political power from other foreign countries in Guyana. Record shows that Mr. Kennedy has briefly discussed the Guyana situation with the British Prime Minister then in the same month of April. So the Department of State in the US had a constant conversation, working along with each other state departments. having a constant conversation about Guyana and its political struggles. So what happened? They were looking at the general view of Mr. Jagan. So after it was a declaration in August the 5th of 1961, and they were looking at the electoral takeover by the then the Jagan government, and the laws that they would have created to gain a majority seat, although they just had 41% of the votes to gain or to clinch power. What happened after then that the US got more involved? So you were seeing that in their own memos, they were saying, we were not inclined to give people like Jagan the same benefit or doubt which was given 2 or 3 years ago to the Castro himself. The UK responded in the 18th of August stating, your people and ours have looked very carefully into the possibilities of taking action to influence the results of the election. I am convinced that there is nothing practical, example, i.e., safe and effective that we could do in this regard. In any case, they would not know how to have enough time at their disposal. What I was looking at is that both the United Kingdom and the United States keep on having themselves being involved in Guyana's politics from since independence and before independence. To get rid of one major party to install another major party, and all these things are going on. Let me show you a specific reason why. Let us look at India and Pakistan. The British government knew years ago, years before India became an independent country, that they had enough fossil fuel around them that Great Britain would have wanted to activate their war machines and all these things. They wanted these things because they knew that they had lots of wealth, natural gas that was there sitting on the shelves of the Indian continent. And they knew if they divided India from Pakistan, or divided Pakistan from India, or divided the population from Muslims and Hindus, that they would have put two nations at war, civil war. So what they were trying to do to Guyana from since then, they were trying to implement those same strategies. So now we have the US doing the same thing that they did in 1961. They were trying to influence Guyana's political culture. But this time, they didn't only influence, they caused an effect in Guyana political culture. Listen to me carefully. The US Secretary of State would never fly to Guyana to sign a contract when they have so many officers beneath him that can sign the contract on behalf of the US government. That was Mr. Michael Pompeo. Remember when he came here? He came to Guyana to a place he doesn't even know. and signed the defense contract. That defense contract caused what you call a political influence in our country by an outside force, by an external force, another sovereign nation. That now that sovereign nation has so much influence on our political culture that now the PPP is dragging Guyana down with it. Let me show you why. PPP has entered into an agreement. There's a memorandum of understanding that was signed of a 1.6 billion US dollars with China alone. China would be willing to loan us that money. But here was the problem. Lending us the money is not the problem. It's the paying back. That's the problem, because China now makes sure when agreements are signed and there's an unavailable term to pay back that money, that they take land for money. And to those who are looking, and to those who think that I don't know what I'm talking about, the Americans have always influenced Guyana's politics, whether it be the PPP or the PNC or the APNU, AFC, and the PPPC. They have always influenced Guyana's political culture. This is not no joke. And they continue to influence Guyana's political culture. They continue to put their foot down and demand that you do this and this and that. They were the ones who approached the David Granger government through the Organization of American States to create a VOS, Voice of America, VOA, radio station here to be penetrated into Venezuela. They were the ones who were discussing a short-term American base to be planted in Guyana to have a minimum amount of troops in case of an uprising in Venezuela and help is needed. They were the ones. All these discussions were discussed and tried to see if an agreement was met. Why do you think they approached the Ghana Defense Force without even the agreement of the President then, Mr. David Granger? They had a meeting, and the American ambassador, Sarah Ann Lynch, went there to discuss civil unrest in case an electoral process does not work by an intervention of American troops. That didn't happen. Now, more intervention is there. And you know what is happening now? Let me show you what's happening now. Let me discuss what is happening with our country now. Now, the government of Guyana is seeking financials through China Exim Bank of around 750 million US dollars for a hydropower facility, and most likely to be planted in Amelia's Falls. And the project that we're talking about, you understand? And when they check up on the entire account and amount, it comes to 1.5 billion US dollars because not only 750 million, but their outstanding amounts that is required to start the project, which is another 750 million by itself. Now they're seeking this through not only Chinese bank, but a Chinese company to create the framework. To create the framework to show exactly how much money they would want to spend, they would need to spend, and to source the funding through Exim Bank. It's a big fancy, let's call it word amount assessment and a memorandum of understanding. And they're looking to use the Natural Resources Fund. But how can they get that? That's an impossible task. That's an impossible task because the Natural Resources Fund got to go through the National Assembly. And you have to have 2/3 approval for the Natural Resources Fund. The Natural Resources Fund is what we call the Sovereign Wealth Fund, SWF. That is, they're held up in the New York Central Bank. So it's causing a friction now with the US because the US now is seeing Guyana is trying to enter into deals with the Chinese. So the US foreign policy now has become more stricter on Guyana. They now become a big influence on Guyana, a larger influence. Because it's the de facto administration that they put in is trying to seek loans from the US, from the Chinese, and then granting the Chinese companies to come and do those kind of works at that particular loan. But then you could understand the political influence and the political fallout that it's having. But don't get tired. These two giants can work together. Because under ESCO Excavation Production Guyana Limited, which is EEPGL, which Exxon falls under, the Chinese falls under that too. And they're working together in the oil and gas sector because that's an agreement. But it's not an agreement now to you to lend Guyana loans and leave us out in the same picture too because Guyana needs to approach us. And how they're going to approach us? Because we now control Guyana through the State Department. So now Guyana become a field country for operatives, intelligence operatives. So when you see a guy come down here, you think he works with the IMF or the IDB. He's an agent. He's a CIA agent. Who knows? Sarah Lynch could be a CIA agent too. Works with the Central Intelligence Agency because these are their officers. The Central Intelligence Agencies, their operatives are not any nobody. They're well qualified, they're well positioned, they have some large employment. So there are people that you cannot recognize to say this is a CIA agent. It can be anybody. A general will come down here from the United States of America to do military operations and do classroom work and bring on a training session, but they work with the Central Intelligence Agency. They're here to acquire information so they can feed back to how to destabilize the situation more. And politically, our politicians know that too. That's a big issue. They know that. And when I mean our politicians, all of them, they know that. If some of them you know all direct, most of them that receives an intelligence report from the special branch knows that. And most of them receive intelligence report. A lot of government officials receive intelligence report. So Guyana is now being flooded with operatives. Now you find the political influence is so thick in this country from the United States of America. Now you have how how should I put it over? Now you have a I'm going to remember just now. Just like how we have the private sector commission, the US is having an office that deals with businesses down here in Guyana pertaining to US companies coming to work in the Guyana. They're now giving Guyanese business a run for their money and giving them competition. And they know that most of these business, it's the US Chambers of Commerce, if I'm correct. Yes, it's the United States is the US Chambers of Commerce down here, locally. And they're spying over all the businessmen here. While the State Department is spying over all the government officials and government agencies that they can't flap their wings. They're suppressing them. This is what is happening right now in this country. And our politicians, I'm not saying we must hate the US. I'm saying these are the deals that our politicians enter with the United States of America. The US only act upon the deals that they enter into these politicians, the things that these politicians promise them. And they make sure they live up to the deals. So the US Chambers of Commerce that are down here making sure that no businesses can rise to the occasion in the oil and gas sector, local businessmen, because they need to show accountability for their monies and how they acquire such wealth. So we got serious problems. And here was the thing. Not only this is happening now in this country, this will start happening until when we need to put a stop to all of this. And how do we do that? By having a roundtable discussion with all the political parties and players involved to create local content. No one party can create local content. That's a big issue on the intelligence part of the Guyana, of Guyana and the US involved, and the State Department involvement of Guyana, creating local content. It's going to be a big issue because exoning and paying nobody nothing. The US State Department will make sure this country run broke on the state run lynch. People think that the US State Department is going to sympathize with Guyana because we got an installed government. You know who they still take report from? Their ambassador. Unless she's up for change, and as far as I'm concerned, I heard that she's up for change this last month. But I don't know if Congress reconvened to allow other ambassadors coming to Guyana. But don't think when the next ambassador come to Guyana, that is going to be business as usual. It's going to be the same thing. Their policies would not change, but the tactical style in which they execute their policies may change. Because they might do it blatant as how Sarah Lynch did it. They might find another way around it. So I'm being straight. Politics will always be influenced by the US State Department in this country because it has started happening from since 1961. These political parties does not These political parties does not sit down and explain to Guyanese what are the cultural effect from political changes that happen constantly in this country. Who are those who are pushing it for a systematic cultural change? Because it's either one party or the other, because they're not influencing their external business people who are involved in them. $727 million a year. That's how much US invests in Guyana per year. 725 million Guyana dollars per year. Not even US. 30% of our GDP. 725 million Guyana dollars per year. But this is what I'm talking about. Unless we, as Guyanese, does not understand the political climate that we have in this country, the influence from another power player, which is the United States of America. Our politics, as long as we don't take charge of our political system, our political culture, we will never be in control of it, no matter which party goes into power. No matter which party goes into power, as long as we cannot take charge of our political culture in this country, we will always have an installed regime, and we'll always have a regime that and another party to be dissatisfied, and we always have one party that will be pushing racism and ethnic cleansing, because that is what the PPP is doing right now. It's an ethnic cleansing that they're participating in. First, get rid of the power structure in the public sector. Knock off a whole set of them. And those that leave back, you threaten them. They got to dance to the music. And they don't care who talks about it. Whether or not you don't like it, that's a business for you. That's how they operate. I'm saying it doesn't matter if it's a Democrat or a Republican goes back into power in the United States government. The mere fact is that we need to understand, and we cannot sit down and just allow this system to change before us. And a party who's continuing to practice terrorism. And I would say this, I don't care who's looking at me from the US Embassy. The party who you're supporting is a terrorist party. They have practiced terrorism upon the citizens of this country. That's the People Progressive Party, Ms. Sarah Lynch. That means to tell me that you're supporting a terrorist party that takes away and terrorizes, takes away the livelihoods of Guyanese and terrorizes Guyanese in general. And they keep on doing it. They don't care because they know you have entered into a deal with them to install them. So they practically can become more terroristically terrible in their behavior. Because they just don't care. We got a big bad Uncle Ben that's supporting us. Now, they're trying to sleep with the enemy, which is China. And the problem is, we continue to peddle these lies that keeps distracting our people from time to time because we cannot focus upon what is important. We're looking for leaders that are being employed by the United States State Department. Those are the leaders we keep looking for, either on the PPP or either on the APNU, AFC or the PNC. I like to sit down and talk about these things because apparently, like, we're not keeping abreast of what is going on. At least I'm not afraid of anything. And I wouldn't be afraid of anything. I'm not afraid to talk about these things. We got to live in a world that has reality in it. The PDP has no money. Where are they getting their funding from? They have no money at all. We just spend all of take away the money and spend it out. They have no money. Where are they getting the finances to continue this barrage of political influence and terrorism in our country? Not from the US State Department. It's common sense. But Jagio seems to want to pick at every lane that he can. She's now upsetting those that installed him by acquiring comfort through the Chinese. America's biggest foe, 1.5 billion US dollars. It's 1.6 as a matter of fact. They're seeking to acquire monies in loans, and they're using the natural resources fund as collateral to borrow this money, monies that they can't touch. That's to show you how we are being controlled. They're trying to borrow money upon the natural resources fund that they cannot touch. What is the natural resources fund? It is the sovereign wealth fund and the natural resources fund governs that sits in the New York Central Bank. The bank got 800 something million US dollars in it, and the government of the day is looking to borrow 1.5 billion US dollars. That's the money they're looking to borrow from China. I know what's happening now. It's causing a major effect in our political culture because both parties know which side of the fence to hang on, which is going to give them justice or which is not going to give them any justice at all. We got to be serious in this place. And it is the straightest stuff as ever. There being a major political influence by the US State Department that's going on in this country for years, since 1961. And they have been advising politicians on how to act. They are being advising politicians how to act. You had a Republican study group that was down here to study things upon the Constitution. I think Barrett now and what's his name? The Chatri Attorney General comes up with a bright idea of zoning Region 4 into 4 zones, Georgia into 2, East Coast and Demerara as 2. So when that electoral system is come about, they ain't got to worry about going back into power because it's the same thing that caused the 1960 civil unrest in this country. Just because of zoning. When everybody gets to know that the PDP can keep winning an election on 41% of the vote. Because that was the rule then. That was the rule then. Because then you didn't have a parliament. I think it was, what was it? I think it was a council they had. But the thing is that they went through that legal system in 1957 to 1961 to change up the way in which a party must win an election. They went through all of that effort to change it, change up voting districts, who got more seats more than who. As long as you pass 41%, you'd eventually win the regional general election because the seats would have doubled then. So everybody sees it as unjust. Because if you have Berbice that has 150,000 people, and you have Region 4 that has 360,000, and Berbice has gained 58 seats, and Region 4 got 35 seats. One region has more votes than the other. So why would one region being allotted more seats more than the other region that has more votes than the other? So that is what caused that uprising in 1961. Because the PPP party keeps winning an election based upon, as we may call it, electoral council. Seats that falls under that electoral council. It's the same thing, the same US style. So what Forbes Burnham did when he came to power, he changed that legislature. That is why you had the 1980 Constitution of the Representation of the People's Act, which states that a party is elected based upon proportional representation, PR. So after that, the PPP never won an election after that. They keep losing because they didn't have the constituency to vote. They didn't have the voting constituency. And it's the same method that we use a day like today. Any 5,000 votes and over, it's one seat. Depends upon the voting population that comes out. We're going to divide it based upon proportional representation of votes. So if it climbed from 5,000 to 7,000 to 8,000, depends upon the voting population that came out. That's how the party wins the seat. You party win 33 out of 65. And all the time coming down, they keep, whichever party win, keeps winning by a one-seat majority. So what happened when they checked the last local government elections? The PPP lose miserably because you had a lot of smaller parties that came out that people decided to vote for. So what happened? The legislature already changed up because you'll find more opposition, proportional representation in the legislature than in the National Assembly. And they didn't like that. How do you think in 2011 the AFC controlled 5 seats in Parliament, chopped up the PPP? Because you know why? They realized they had a 1-seat majority in the National Assembly with their 5 seats. So when they joined with the APNU AFC or with the PNC then, or the APNU AFC because Grady was opposition leader, they keep chopping them up because within the proportional representation, they couldn't even take away a seat from somebody because you had lots of smaller parties that contested in the local government election. So now you have the Americans now involving themselves in that political culture of Guyana. They're trying to change it up. And they're getting the help of Mr. Jack Dio because he signed that contract to give away Guyana. If I am Biden and I come into power and I see that, well, look, I done signed a contract for giving Guyana, and Guyana got billions upon billions of barrels of oil that we country need and could take. Well, then that better take it away from me because they make got sense. It's common sense. If I was Biden as American, I come and I do the same thing. I didn't have time with Rick Burke and all them. I would do the same thing. I didn't care who talk. I name Biden. And when I look, I see the Guyana free, free, free. You can imagine you enter into a deal with 2% royalty, 2.5. Before that, you had 1.5. You didn't even know what was the resale value percentages on the barrels of oil that they would have sold for us under the PVP. Under the AP and UFC, well, we get to know that it was 49.51. But the oil didn't even get in sell yet. We were just given bonuses based upon an assessment of oil extracted out of the well from ExxonMobil. That's all we were given. A bonus based upon assessment. And now we have these multinational countries laughing at us because here was the problem now. And I'm saying, up to now, the dunce that he says he so love Guyana, and Guyana for all Guyanese, is not making an effort to sit down to say, well, look, I know we are at odds, but it's required for us to review this contract every 5 years. Let me sit down and review it according to the law. But he ain't doing that. He ain't got time for sit down and review no contract. So what happened? There's no accountability for the oil being drawn out. We know if the well dry for truth, as they say, or if they get an amount of at least commercially 500,000 to 1 million barrels a day. We don't know that. We have to depend upon the same company that taking it from me to tell us how much we getting per day. So these people sit down laughing at me. They able to turn and tell me the first thing. Well, if you want to come and review the contract, I will only accept you and the opposition party, both they are together. So now Guyanese lives are being juggled. You know, we're in a circus. Because the shake tongues we got for politicians. They're skinning the teeth that we and the people out there laughing at us. They're skinning the teeth, they're laughing at us. So watch these jokers. You know what's the most horrible thing ever that is happening now? Is yet still we cannot take control of the situation that is plaguing our country as a people. Politicians can't make deals on behalf of us. They don't know how to start. They don't know how to start making any deals. And because they don't know how to start making, you could imagine this is the thing what's going on. You got a company give you a bill, a receipt for 9.5 billion US dollars spent so far since the start this operation. Now the company is saying, in order for you to audit us, you can't bring a local company to audit us because never in history, in Guyana's history, no local company has ever audited Guyana's finances that is over $1 billion US dollars. So now you got to travel to the US, make some bargaining deals with some other companies that is custom auditing. Macro companies like Exxon, not a micro, macro. So here are we getting laugh at Mobad. The Economist, the rat, by Jack Deal. Can't even come around that discussion. So Guyana upon give way. Because to audit ExxonMobil, you have to have a certified company that's accustomed auditing that kind of amount of money in expenditures. 9 over 10 over 15 over 20, 25, $50 billion. We ain't got the company to audit them kind of money. Because in order for you to audit those kinds of money, you have to have vast experience and know how to get the audit done. They can't pick up the phone and call nobody overseas and ask them if Exxon spent so much money at the company and we can get the receipt. Because the first thing they look at is the big crooks and criminals we got in Guyana. Soon as we start up a company, you check the man background. Check your background. People laughing at you. We can't do nothing. We can't represent our own self. About want to borrow $1.6 billion based upon the money in the natural resources account. Whether it's take up in the New York Central Bank, controlled by the Sovereign Wealth Fund Committee. It's who Barrett think he fooling. I would like to hear Christopher Ram talk about this. Christopher Ram, you hearing me? Take one for the road. Let's get serious. You borrowing 1.5 billion US dollars, 1.6 billion. That is this from the Xi National Bank, which is China National Bank. You want to borrow 1.6 billion based upon an acquired money in the Natural Resources Fund that is controlled by the Sovereign Wealth Fund Committee, an international committee that says to the Guyanese government, if you're coming here to borrow, if you're coming here to this account, and you can't come and withdraw money, you got to come and borrow money, because at the end of the day, you got to pay back, you got to put back Guyana's money there with interest so our people can benefit from it. I wonder when we can start. But only we go along the line yet. 1.6 billion. They're aiming to borrow from the China. That's what they're aiming to borrow, based upon what is in the Natural Resources Fund that they can't even touch. They can't touch it. They could sing how much tune they want. They still can't touch it. Can't even borrow money on it. The bunny die. You know? And my son watching another man play to get red eye. That's what's happening. Now we have the State Department now looking at me, laughing at me because we don't know where to turn. When are we going to start auditing Exxon? We got to bring an external audit team in. We got to have enough money to pay them. Another team that auditing over 9 point something billion US dollars. They're looking for percentages. Some of them might want 50% of the money they got to audit. Where we going to find it from to pay them? We can't even pay our own public servants. Barrett tell the people the truth. As a matter of fact, Ashley Singh let the people know that you don't have money, forget them. The 7% that you say that you're claiming, you got to borrow it to pay them. Guyanese, the government broke. They're in red. They're in red, minus, that's their expenditure. The year ain't even done yet, they're done in red. The consolidated fund, it's empty. They don't spend out 50 something million US dollars, done, gone, spent. They ain't even supposed to go so far. It's at 40 million US dollars, this is what they got to stop at. because they can't spend past the surplus of the economy. The Bank of Guyana only issues Bank of Guyana only issues 20 million US dollars to float around. So I don't know where they're getting this epiphany from, this idea. We're a failed state. People need to tell the truth. We can't move without the approval of the State Department. And those operatives that are coming here are laughing at us even more because the Central Intelligence Agency expenditure is far more than 9.5 billion. They must see a war day agents to come to Guyana and barely spend $1 billion US dollars, not even so much. A million US is 200 million Guyana dollars. A man could come here with $2 million and create havoc in this place. And here was the problem. Every day they get them talking about how good they're doing for Guyana. But they ain't telling you the truth. They're not telling you the truth. They can't do better for Guyana. What they're doing is taxpayers' money to give him back. Them 25,000 Guyana dollars and 50,000, 250,000. It's taxpayers' money. When GRA don't give the accumulation when they month up, there's the money taken and given back to the general public. So they get cane cut is 250,000, they get public service 4,500, the 7%. You can imagine this ice pass. You could imagine this ice pass. This is real ice pass. We don't understand they make our money. They can't even float. They're hoping that the US put some money into them. But the US ain't gonna put no money into them, brothers and sisters, Guyanese are. We are going to be held as slaves. You ever hear about Puerto Rico? Puerto Rico is what I would say is a colony of the United States of America. It's a state, but their policies of governance are different. They can vote in the general elections, but their votes are not counted in that general election. So whichever party wins power, the governor of Puerto Rico comes from that particular party, whether it be Republican or Democrat. And they got a whole lot of restrictions. Nobody can do trade deals with them like that as they could because they have laws that preventing them from doing that. You could imagine what can happen to Guyana just now. We can have a constant installed government. And the opposition might be the AP and UFC can't do a thing. Because I don't see that they're willing to do anything right now. Everybody's waiting to see if Norton would be elected leader of the opposition and leader of the PNC to start something as a representation to Guyanese and Black Guyanese also too. Everybody's looking for that. Everybody's waiting. For me, we wait too long. Let us say if the Congress is still next year, it's another year, but we can take of sheer dictatorship, bullyism, modern mayhem and terror. Think about it. and we become more enslaved to the United States of America, because I consider myself now, I consider Guyana now as being a country that is colonized to slavery now. Because if you look at it, it's a lot of slavery going on. People are being enslaved. People are now working for low wages than ever. Cost of living has doubled since the de facto administration got in. Cost of living has doubled. And you can imagine the Duns trying to tell people, well, this is the way it is now. Instead of trying to make out and trying to create a solution where people can eventually eat, or you got somebody posting a picture with an indigenous woman and said, I don't know if it's a daughter or a boy or a girl, was being severely malnourished. That means people are being starving in this country. People are suffering. And they are hungry. Because how many more persons like that we got? We got people in eating for days. Now we have a constant co-op market society now sprouting its head around the country, because people now got to realize that you have to be food dependent and not food, sorry, you got to be food independent and not food dependent upon the United States of America. Food security is Guyana's one main resource. We have to have a food security, because if we don't have food security, then we'll have a lot of unhealthy persons walking around the place, unable to eat healthy, because everything they eat comes out from a can that comes all the way from the United States of America with heavy preservatives. Then we will have a nation that 60% of its population are medically in dire straits. We will have that. And that only happens when a country does not have food security. If America controls that, that's the end of Guyana. Right now, they're controlling our political culture. We are the people who have to change it. That's the only way US will sit and bargain with us. Right now, they're not bargaining with us because we have a lot of dunce and foolish people who cannot able to bargain for their own households. A simple little thing like $50 million US getting them stupid.